Morning again. So, you weren't here last week. You missed it. They sing. It's called "The Right Place, the Right Time," and talks about we're gathering in accordance to God's word, and we're at the right place at the right time. And I really think that's what's happening here right now. If you weren't here, I stood right over there and saw a miracle last week. I was standing right by Brother Brown and Sister Brown and a 91-year-old. I saw Sister Vernon talk somebody through their fear and their anxiety and watched Sister Brown's mom get the Holy Ghost. And yeah. And I mean, it wasn't 30 seconds. It's not difficult. We make it so hard sometimes, right? But there was fear there, you could tell. And I want to speak to that a little bit today because fear can be a giant. And I want to speak about dealing with giants. And guess where we're going? 1 Samuel 17. I'm not going to read the whole chapter because I've got 20 to 30 minutes, and that'll probably take 15 of the 30. So this is a story of David and Goliath, and we'll go into 1 Samuel 17 along the way. But this is the story more about David than Goliath, right? It's the story about a young guy that, the Bible in Psalms 17 and 8 says, David wrote, "Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings." The apple is the very center of your eyeball, and in ancient days, one of the objectives was to scar the apple and ruin a person's vision. The word David from the Old Testament in Hebrew means the apple of God's eye. So this is a guy we should pay attention to, right? And David turned into a great warrior, a great leader, but getting there was not instant oatmeal. It didn't happen overnight. And there are more examples in Scripture. You think of Moses and the way God used him to deliver Israel. You know where he was before he spent 40 years in the wilderness? He was 40 years in the wilderness after killing an Egyptian, right? And sometimes, God doesn't work on our time frame. He just doesn't. And it takes time for us as people to get to the point where God can accomplish the things that he wants to accomplish through us. And so a big part of this story is not just what David did, but where he came from. And so this guy, when we were doing parent-teacher conferences when our kids were little, we'd go into these things, and the first question I'd ask the teacher was, "Is my child treating you with respect?" And my kids knew what would happen if they weren't. Let's just put it that way. Corporal punishment, as it were. But when we'd go into John's parent-teacher conferences, we'd start asking, "How's he doing in this and how's he?" And the teacher would start talking, and they'd stop and they'd just say, "He's just got it. And that's John. He just does. He's the smart one in our family. He's a lot smarter than me." And this is David. This is just a guy, if he were in a parent-teacher conference, the teacher would just say, "He's just got it." But you hear stories about birth order. Well, David was the baby of the family, right? And so I'm the oldest of the family, so I took all the hard knocks for my brother and sisters. If you're the oldest in your family and you have other siblings, you probably know what that's like. For instance, when I'd ask my dad on a Friday if I could use the car once I got my driver's license, he'd say, "Yeah, but the house needs to be painted. Why don't you take care of that?" And by the time my brother came along, he had his own set of keys and he could just go anywhere he wanted when he wanted. So David was last in birth order, and so the baby tends to sometimes get relegated to tasks that maybe might be considered menial by some. But this guy showed that he had a military genius. He led a weak, obscure nation to become a world power. If you read about, he killed a lion and a bear, and it talks about when he killed the lion, he grabbed him by the beard. I mean, this guy was athletic, and he was physically gifted. So God writes the story about this man, and when you put things in perspective, Abraham's story got 14 chapters. Joseph's life was described in 14 chapters. Jacob's story was told in 11 chapters. Elijah's in 9 chapters. David's story fills all 66 books. He's mentioned Old Testament, New Testament. He wrote the book of Psalms. And as we know, Jesus was born out of the lineage of David, right? So, but I think one of his most famous things that he did is that he took care of the giant Goliath. And so if we study his life, Goliath wasn't the biggest giant he ever tackled. He faced much worse things than Goliath was said and done, right? And if you read 1 Samuel 17, you'll know this story, that the setting of the battle was that the Philistines were on one side of a valley and Israel was on the other side. And every day Goliath came out and challenged this guy. He's from a family of giants. And every day he would come out and challenge somebody, "Send me a man. Give me somebody to fight. And if I beat them, you serve us. And if he beats me, we'll serve you." Of course, we know he's a liar, right? Because after David killed him, they fled, they ran, they didn't stay there to serve the Israelites. So the Philistines were the best equipped army in the world because they had exclusive rights to iron. And so they had weapons that were more effective than the Israelites. The Philistine army was on one side. The Hebrews were farmers. They were shepherds. They were hill people. They weren't industrialized at all. And so they weren't good fighters. That's not how they were built. So in this face-off, we've got this typical no-win situation. It just doesn't look like Israel's going to be able to pull this off. And out on level ground, it probably wouldn't have been any match. But there's some interesting dialogue that takes place in terms of the choice of weapon and the debate that took place between Saul, the king of Israel, and David. Saul wanted him to wear his armor, and he tried it on. And I don't think David was a real big person. And it just wasn't right for him. And he chose what he knew, and that was a sling. And don't underestimate the power of a sling. It's like a Colt 45 in a leather pouch. And so David picks up 5 smooth stones and walks out to face the giant, and the target on Goliath is the only area that's exposed, and it's right in his forehead. So, ironically, even though David's weapon didn't seem to be very formidable, it gave him a huge advantage over Goliath because he could sling that stone from a distance, where Goliath had a spear, and he had next thing to hand combat is what would be required for Goliath to get David. David didn't need to get extremely close to his enemy, and the stone hit him right where it needed to be. Now, I love to hunt, and I don't hunt unless I've sighted in my weapon. I got a hunch that David was well practiced with that sling. This wasn't his first rodeo, as they say. So to hit that spot I'm sure it took practice. And so the stone hit Goliath, penetrated his skull, went through his brain, and he was dead before he hit the ground. So then David went up and took his sword and cut his head off. And we can read between the lines of this story, and there's some biblical principles here we can learn about how we fight giants. And giants can take on all different forms in our lives. Some of them are spirit. Some of them take on the form of temptations, unique to whether we're a man or a woman. Some are habits that need to be broken. Some are relationships with people that are strange to us. A giant can be any situation or obstacle that you have to face in your life. And so I just want to quickly outline 7 principles that we can use for dealing with giants that are based on, the encounter that David's encounter with Goliath. First of all, we've already touched on it. We prepare to meet giants in secret places. Life's battles are won or lost in secret closets of prayer, in wilderness places where nobody's watching, in places that are out of the way when God builds character in us. And it's kind of ironic that we become what God wants us to be when we are alone. It's not a public thing. And it's not something, I remember hearing my pastor years and years ago saying, you need to be prayed up because you never know when you're going to need instant access to God. Sloppy, careless preparation and character discipline, you can't recover that in just a moment of crisis. We need to be ready and prepared. So critical times reveal what is really inside of us. Our church has been through some stuff, hasn't it? I'm looking at people that are here for the long run. I'm looking at people here who are committed to sticking it out. And we've lost people. We have. But this is the right time. This is the right place. And we are here at the right time and in the right place. And we've gone through a difficult time, and we've come through this, and the people here, I think we've got people of character here. Because that's what happens when you go through tough times. When you're alone, that's when character is built. And the critical times reveal our character. And we don't wait till the last minute to prepare, till we really need God. We get ready along the way. We don't wait until we've got cancer to learn how to pray, right? We get that skill down, so when we need access to God, we know how to get there. And we know how to get there in a short period of time. David was prepared for this very public encounter with Goliath because in the privacy of being a shepherd alone in the Judean hills, he had practiced his weapons and he had developed discipline in his life. And David had a prayer life that was current. A relationship with God was a reality in David's life, and his relationship was not one based on theory. He knew, by the time he got to Goliath, he knew what worked and what didn't work. And that's why he didn't choose Saul's armor. He knew it wouldn't work. He had already been tested, tried, and he practiced and disciplined himself until he was ready for this battle of his young life. So David, when he was in the field with being a shepherd, wasn't sitting around eating sheep and getting fat. Nope. He was preparing. When the prophet came to Jesse's house looking for Saul's replacement as king of Israel, God's final choice wasn't sitting around the house waiting to be crowned. He was in the field going through the daily grind of being a shepherd. That's where he was. Zig Ziglar used to say, when preparation crosses paths with opportunity, success happens. Second thing we need to know is that giants will keep coming in life. When you read the story about Goliath, he came twice daily to challenge the army of Israel. When we've done battle with one giant, there'll be another one to take its place. Some giants return for a rematch. Some giants are related to another of their kind. Did you know that David, when he picked the stones, how many stones did he pick? How many did he use? You know that Goliath had 4 brothers? Giants can keep coming. There might be more of them. Once you beat one, there might be another one. And so we don't just settle in when we have a battle that we've won. We never really arrive, right? And here's how it worked for David in 2 Samuel 21, verses 15 to 22. I think I gave that to him. Okay, moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel. And David went down and his servants with him and fought against the Philistines, and David waxed faint. These parents that named these guys. And Ishbibenob. Here's my son, Ishbibenob. What's your granddaughter's name? Much better. And this guy, which was of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass in weight, he being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, succored him and smote the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore unto him, saying, Thou shalt go no more out with us to battle, that thou quench not the light of Israel. And it came to pass after this, there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Shebechai the Hushathite slew Saph, which was one of the sons of the giant. And there was again a battle at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jerogeam, the Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a beaver's weem. And there was yet a battle in Gath, where there was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he was also born to the giant, and he defied Israel. Jonathan, the son of Shimeah, the brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. There were 4 more giants, all related to Goliath, And apparently all of these were alive at the time that David slew Goliath. So David took 5 stones and he used one, but he knew there was more coming. And that's the way life tends to be. Here's something else. At the time 2 Samuel was written, David was around 78 years old. David was a young man when he slew Goliath. The stuff you don't kill when you're young will come back to haunt you when you're older. We live with stuff that comes out of our youth, stupid things that we do. So it's best to take care of them. Young people, if you're smart, you'll take care of stuff in business right now. Kill all of the giants and you won't have to deal with them later in life. So, notice here too that it wasn't just David alone that did all of this. David had help, right? We need to rely on one another when it comes time to dealing with these things. Another lesson learned: when you defeat a giant, finish the job. Go for a complete victory. If that would have happened, that 2 Samuel encounter probably would have never happened. So principle number 3 is know a giant when you see one. It's easy. You think giants are big. Well, you need to think again. You know, if you look at 1 Samuel 17 and 28, this is when, again, the youngest in the family comes to see what's going on with the battle between the Israelites and the Philistines. And David's oldest brother, Eliab, it says here, and Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither, and why hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? This is an older brother talking to his punk young brother, right? I know thy pride and thy naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that you might see the battle. You're just going to be a spectator. You just wanted to come down here for the fun of it and see what's going on. So that didn't distract David, though. It's easy to get distracted, and often distractions come from those that are closest to us. Eliab wasn't the giant. He wasn't the problem, but he had a bad attitude, but that wasn't the problem. The giant was the problem. But we can get distracted by things that are not really the problem. So that's principle number 3, know a giant when you see one. Principle number 4, don't listen to human advice. King Saul represents those who are serving the Lord in their own human carnal spirits, where we read in 1 Samuel 17:33, it says, And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. Then verses 38 and 39, And Saul armed David with his armor and put on a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail, and David girded his sword up under his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I can't go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put him off of them. This was Saul's advice. Here's what everybody else is using. You use it too. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's a good thing. So David, even though Saul said, you're too small, you're too young, you're not properly trained, you're not properly equipped, and you're not using the right methods, what are you doing here? Good thing David didn't listen to the experts. Shall I wax political? I've heard 2 different definitions of the word expert. One is an X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. And the other is an expert's just a regular guy more than 50 miles from home with a briefcase. I don't know, you pick. Good thing David didn't listen to the experts. So there's wisdom in that for us now too, right? And you know what? Your weapons are going to be different than my weapons. Just like David's weapon was different than Saul's weapon. That's the way it works. So don't listen to everything you hear. YouTube doesn't have all the answers. Although I do go there every time I need to fix my car. Is that being hypocritical? I don't know. Principle number 5. Fighting giants can be intimidating. Giants can be big. Goliath was over 9 feet tall. 6 fingers and 6 toes. That would freak me out right there. He really had a grip on things, I guess. Who made his shoes? You got to think of these things. Goliath was a big mouth. He used his physical endowments to be an intimidator. And the thing I love about David is that he didn't let that get to him. You know why? Because David didn't look at the giant in the fight. He looked at the Lord in the fight. David's secret weapon is that he saw Goliath through God's eyes. David's faith was his sight wasn't his faith. And God, look, I'm getting old, and well, you're getting older every day, or you want to get older, trust me. But you got to be tough to get old. It's not easy, right, Brother Brown? Sister Brown's not here, so I can't pick on her. But as we get older, God has earned my trust. Let me just put it that way. I've been through enough to know that He's enough, no matter what comes along. But you don't know that He's enough until He's been enough, and to have Him be enough, you got to go through some stuff so He can be enough. Does that make sense? So David refused to be bullied and blown away by the bravado that Goliath brought to the fight. And David also understood that giants are liars. Again, in 1 Samuel 17:9, Goliath said, if I beat you, you serve me. If you beat me, we serve you. When David slew him, they didn't serve him, they ran. Goliath was a liar, in addition to being a freak of nature. So, after David killed Goliath, the Philistines ran for their lives. So David was in control because God was in control in David's life. In 1 Samuel 17:47, for the battle is the Lord, and He will give all of you into our hands. If the battle is the Lord's, then why did David have to fight? You know why? We're His hands and we're God's feet, right? Still are. The same principle applies today. When Israel went into the promised land, the land of Canaan that the Lord had given to Israel, what did they have to do? They had to fight for it, right? Now, the way they fought wasn't conventional warfare, was it? It was another example of do it God's way and you're going to be okay. So after they crossed into Jericho, they still had to march, shout, and fight. So even though God will fight our battles and the battle belongs to the Lord, there's a role that we play in all of this. You know, fighting giants is a lonely experience. David didn't take a regiment with him, did he? He walked into that battle alone, all by himself. No help other than God was there. But we can't reach and press the flesh of God, can we? How do we know he's there? We can get counsel, we can seek help, we can ask for advice, receive prayer support, but ultimately we're going to have to handle our giants on our own. It's up to us. And never forget this, though, that humanly speaking, we face giants alone. God, he said he promised us he would never leave us and he would never forsake us. He'll always be with us. Remember when Jesus was in the boat with the disciples in the middle of the storm? This fierce storm arose. Jesus is sleeping in the bow of the boat. God was there right with them, but they forgot that God was with them and they focused on the storm and instead of being focused on God. And that's an easy thing to have happen. So, last principle. We need to know what to remember. You know, I believe it's in Philippians, it tells us the things that we should think on. Think on those things that are good, pure, honest, of good report. We need to remember what God has done for us in the past. And this is where being faithful over time pays dividends. Because you'll be able to look back. You've, Brother Cordell, from this pulpit many times talked about your circumstance out in the Dells. We were close working together a lot back in those days, and I knew it was not a fun time for you, but now in the rearview mirror, you can say, this is what God did for me. But you got to go through those things so you can say, this is what God did for me. And that's what we need to focus on, and that's what we need to remember. It's easy, and you know what? Satan will bring your failures up before you. You know what? He's not called the accuser of the brethren for no good reason. He's going to be your accuser. He'll be happy to remind you of every little failure that you've ever had. And if you focus on those things, fighting giants can be a tough task. So we need to remember the good things that God has done. We need to remember what we should forget and forget what we should remember. Right? So, 1 Samuel, I just want to read a few verses here, 17, 34 through 37. David said unto Saul, this is David telling Saul his experience. This is David's Wisconsin Dells. This is David, name it in your life. Okay? And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. He wrestled with a stinking lion and had him by the throat. Says, thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defiled the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto him, David, go, and the Lord be with you. Sounds like a good plan, son. You go do this. So after David cut off Goliath's head, he went into his tent and he pilfered it. He took all of Goliath's stuff. And he kept his sword, and he used that sword later in battle. There are some trophies that are there for defeating giants. And once you've won a few of these battles, you'll have stuff to go to the next battle with. So, in conclusion, don't despise lonely places of preparation, the shepherd fields of obscurity. Be prepared. Start it today and be ready for the battles of tomorrow. Don't wait until the crisis to prepare. Remember this too, we don't battle against flesh and blood. In our culture and in this time, and the things that are coming against us, this is not about flesh and blood. This is about spiritual things. Spiritual wickedness in high places. If you don't see that now, open your eyes. This isn't a physical battle. I don't want to associate or assassinate I don't wish harm to any of these people. They are being used as pawns in Satan's game. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, and it's just right out in plain sight now. And that's the difference between now and 10 or 15 years ago, right? So we don't battle against flesh and blood. These are spiritual battles. So we should seek spiritual advice. And remember David's secret weapon. He saw Goliath through God's eyes. And also remember, the battle is not yours. It belongs to the Lord. Don't focus on the giant in the battle. Focus on the Lord in the battle, and never forget the victories of the past. And folks, we are the children of God. We are sons and daughters of Almighty God, and He is for us. The Lord is on my side. Why should I fear? What can men do unto me? That's Psalms 118:6. So we need to remember then who we are and the name that we bear. God bless you today.